What's up everyone, Daniel Yuck here. Thank you all for tuning in today, I appreciate you. In today's video, we're going to be diving into a needle depth visual demonstration here. Not only am I going to be using this visual art right here, I'm also going to be using a digital caliper with some coins. We're going to be using a banana, so by the end of this video, you will be well acquainted with needle depth, so be sure to stick around till the end. Should you have any questions along the way, I'm going to highly encourage you to drop a comment down below, and I'm going to do my absolute best to assist you in the best possible direction. I also have Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. I would truly appreciate your support on there as well. If you find my channel helpful and enjoy my videos, consider becoming a Patreon or purchasing a super thanks in this video down below. I would truly appreciate the support as well. With that being said, let's dive straight on into this. To understand needle depth, I feel that it's important to understand the layers of the skin that we are dealing with when it comes to depositing ink into skin. Allow me to touch base and explain a little bit more on these. The epidermis is the first layer of the skin, the dermis is the second, and the hypodermis is the last right here, as we can see according to this visual chart right here. Now, the idea is, let's say if we were to deposit ink only into the epidermis, typically over time what happens is the tattoos would tend to look faded, the lines will look inconsistent, and people will say that it's faded over time. Sometimes if we didn't go deep enough, the tattoo may just kind of fall out altogether, which is also experienced as well upon healing. So the idea is, if they didn't go deep enough, which is this layer right here, if the if the pigment was only inputted into this layer, then that's typically what we tend to experience. The dermis is the layer where we want the ink to live in. This is where we want to shoot for when we are doing tattoos. We want to deposit ink into the dermis. Depositing ink into the dermis layer ensures that the tattoo will hold indefinitely. The epidermis ensures fading, and as we just went over, the dermis is where the tattoo ink should live. The hypodermis is where we experience blowouts, scarring. You get the idea. This is an area where the ink will even tend to blur under the skin and even sometimes look like bruising permanently. So you can kind of get the idea. A whole bunch of crazy stuff happens when we go too deep within the layers of the skin. So the epidermis, we get ink fallout, tattoo fading. The dermis ensures the tattoo will hold indefinitely, and the hypodermis is where blowouts happen. Before we proceed to some visuals, one thing that I want to point out, and I want you all to please note, is that needle depth is definitely going to vary from person to person and body placement to body placement. So what that means is, say for example, the needle depth on the forearm is going to dramatically be different from an eyelid. Let's say an eyelid needle depth is going to dramatically be different from needle depth on the buttocks. So you kind of get the idea from there. So this right here is going to be an overview of how it works. I want to give you all visual demonstrations of how deep certain measurements are. So by the end of the video, you will be well acquainted with how deep to go on skin, and you can be more accustomed and more acquainted with the idea of needle depth in general. And again, I'm going to encourage you to drop comments down below should you have any questions at all. Now that we are acquainted with the layers of the skin, and now that we know where the ink actually goes when we are depositing it into the skin, how deep is the dermis? So the dermis typically ranges 1.5 to 2 millimeters below the surface of the skin. And again, as I stated, please keep in mind that it does vary. So adjusting to needle depth is something that we have to more so develop into, as opposed to kind of just know off of the top. So don't be discouraged. Just keep in mind that needle depth is definitely something that we have to work into, and needle depth and understanding how to properly input ink into the correct layer of the skin is something that is worked into and developed, and I cannot exhaust that enough. Now that we know the layers of the skin, and now that we're more acquainted with where the ink should be, and now that we have the information of 1.5 to 2 millimeters below the surface of the skin, let's switch on over to a different angle here, and let's measure out some coins so we can get some visual measurement here. To give us a good idea as to the needle depth, I'm going to give us a visual measurement using this digital caliper, and I'm also going to be doing that with this banana. So I encourage you to stick around to the end of this video and drop comments down below should you have any. What I'm going to do is I'm going to measure each one of these coins. I'm going to show you them sideways, and we're going to measure them with this digital caliper to give us a good visual idea as to how deep 1.5 to 2 millimeters actually is. So beginning with the penny, I'm going to turn the caliper on. It's reading at 0. What I'm going to do is I'm going to open it up. Then we're going to place the penny inside right here, like so. I'm going to make sure I clamp it in there. and the caliper is showing at 1.59 millimeters. So right here is 1.58 millimeters. So the depth of a penny is essentially a healthy needle depth. And again, granted, this is going to vary from placement to placement, skin type to skin type, but you can kind of get the general idea. 1.5 millimeters, this is what it's looking like right here. It may vary for you by some points on your end, but the overall measurement for a penny is looking like it's 1.58 millimeters, give or take. Let's go ahead and repeat this process with the coins here. I'm going to place it back at 0, calibrate. We're going to open it up just a bit. Place in the coin, and then I'm going to close it up. And the nickel is coming in at 1.90 millimeters, as you can see right here. So 10 more, we're risking a blowout. 10 more, we were at 2 even. So as you can see right here though, this nickel is coming in at 1.90 millimeters. So according to the visual representation that I was showing you all earlier, it was saying that we are at 1.5 to 2 millimeters. So we're still looking at a semi-healthy needle depth right here. For me personally, this looks a little deep. However, to each their own. This also still technically falls under a healthy needle depth. Anything below this I feel would cause scarring, raising of the skin, and depending on the application, how it was applied, even though it was at the right depth, we can still get raised skin as well. But this nickel is coming in at 1.90 millimeters right here. And then we're going to go ahead and repeat that process with the dime. Recalibrate, reopen, and then replace it in there. And this dime appears to be coming in at 1.31 millimeters, as you can see right here. This right here appears to be a bit shallow according to the reference that we were looking at earlier. This appears to be a bit too shallow. However, again, depending on the placement would determine that ultimately, but this dime is coming in at 1.31 millimeters. Let's go ahead and move on to the quarter and repeat that process. So it looks as though the quarter is going to be coming in at 1.71 millimeters after locking it in there. And the depth of a quarter is looking at 1.71 millimeters. So for me, technically, all of these right here fall within the reference guide there. And granted, I can't exhaust that enough that it is going to vary from placement to placement and skin type to skin type. This quarter is coming in at 1.72 millimeters here. I have a piece of Reelskin right here. I'm sure a lot of us are familiar with this fake skin. I use it often, as well as Trueskin. Allow me to measure the Reelskin here so that we can get an idea how thick this actually is here. So the Reelskin looks like it's coming in at about 1.991 millimeters. So 1.91 millimeters right here, as you can see, according to this digital caliper. And this is Reelskin fake skin. For me, what this is telling me is that this is a really good fake skin to practice on. So if I'm pulling lines on this and I'm seeing them through the back, chances of me blowing out human skin are greater. So this is a great fake skin to practice on, along with Trueskin. Trueskin is dramatically thicker, however, it is still a good quality fake skin. But you can see though, practicing on Reelskin will allow you to adjust your needle depth and get to where you need to be. So I would highly recommend to practice on fake skin first before proceeding to human skin. I believe the Reelskin fake skins also do fluctuate in size by a bit, but this specific slab that I have right here is coming in at 1.91 millimeters, as we can see. Now that we have an idea of some visual measurements, I want to get more into some demonstration aspects. But before I show you blowing out actual human skin, and before we get into the whole banana aspect, I want to talk about hanging out my needle right here. And I want to kind of touch base on that aspect as well. One thing that I want to point out is hanging out our needle is going to be artist subjective, to each their own 110%. For me personally, I like to hang out my needle quite a bit, and for a couple of reasons. For me, it provides me with a cleaner workflow, less pulling, and on top of that, I'm able to see my needle tip from A to B upon pulling lines. So those are some major reasons why I choose to personally hang my needle out quite a bit. What I would like to show you is some measurements here of needle hang, and I want to show you some visual demonstrations here. So I'm going to have this machine running, and then we're going to measure it with the caliper. So let's go ahead and turn the caliper on, and let's take a measurement here of this needle. According to this digital caliper, the needle is hanging out from the end of the cartridge tube to the end of the needle tip about 1.47. Granted, that is going to be by a few because I'm not touching the needle tip there. But right now, this needle is hanging out at about 1.47 millimeters according to the digital caliper. I'm not sure if you can see that and how far that actually is there, but it's not far at all. For me personally, I would consider this riding the tube, because you got to remember, machines have resistance and there is sort of like bogging down that does happen. So the needle is going to get pushed in quite a bit as well. So it's definitely going to ride the plastic cart here with it sticking out this much. For me personally, this is going to cause pulling, and this is going to prevent me from seeing where I need to be correctly. So where I like to personally hang my needle out is somewhere around here. The reason being is, again, I'm able to see my needle tip from A to B, and that may be a little too much. Let me take it in a couple notches. But I'm able to see my needle tip from A to B, and the ink flows smoother, resulting in less pulling, so therefore it's a cleaner pull for me. Let's go ahead and take a measurement of this one right here. So from plastic tip to needle tip there, we're looking at about 2.81 millimeters. Now keep in mind, when I'm tattooing with this needle depth right here, I'm not inputting this entire needle into the skin. This is not completely going into the skin. When I'm tattooing with this needle depth, what's happening is I'm using just the very tips of the needles to input the ink. So therefore, from a profile view, it looks like this, and this is what the banana is for. We're going to get into that here shortly. But you can see from this profile view right here, I'm working off just the very tips of my needles to get into the skin. I'm not putting the cartridge in like this and then tattooing with this entire tip of the needle, or with this entire portion that's sticking out from the cart. I'm just tattooing with the very tips. And that, for me, provides me with less pulling and a cleaner workflow. Before we move on, I want to get an appropriate measurement here. So I'm going to take it down to about 1.5, 1.45. That's about healthy right there. And I'm going to show you how much of the needle tip is actually being used when tattooing. So again, when we're tattooing, just because the needle's hanging out that much doesn't mean that we're driving that much needle into the skin. So let's picture this left side right here, the epidermis, the base of the skin, and down here is the hypodermis, and the dermis is in here. I'm not driving the needle into there. I'm not simply, going like this and then tattooing the dermis. We're simply working our way gradually into the dermis, and then we're pulling our line like so, and then we're coming out of the dermis. So you can see right here again, the needle tip. Keep in mind this top part right here is the dermis, this top line right here. And then we work our way into it. We hit the dermis, pull the line, and then we come out. I hope that makes sense. And I'm going to actually get into more visual demonstrations here, and I'm going to elaborate more on that. But I just wanted to reiterate that we're not putting in the entire needle tip. It's just the entire needle section that's sticking out of the cartridge right here. We're not putting that in there. We're just using the very tips of the needles. And as you can see, it's very light there. Let's move on to the banana demonstration. And as you can see, the banana provides us with a wall lining right here that we're going to utilize to demonstrate needle depth. What I'm going to do is I'm going to demonstrate some blowouts right here, and I'm going to demonstrate different needle depths within this banana, and I'm actually going to show you all what blowing out human skin looks like. So again, I can't exhaust this enough. Be sure to stick around to the end of the video. I'm going to leave my needle hanging out as we just went over, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to get some ink, and I'm going to deposit ink into different depths here, so that way we can get a good idea of different needle depths here. So going too light will kind of look something like this to me. So as you can see, we're like hitting these superficial layers of the skin, just the very top. So over time, as this is healing, if it heals and stays, whatever stays is definitely going to fade if it all doesn't fall out during the healing process. As you can see, I'm at the very kind of superficial layers of the skin. Went a little deeper here, but you can kind of get the idea. So this right here, for me, would be considered hitting the epidermis. Let's go ahead and turn the banana over here, and then I'm going to do the dermis in this area, and I'm going to get to a bit of a more healthier depth where the ink is going to stay and the tattoo is going to hold indefinitely. So as you can see, I'm working and getting the tip into there. And you can see it's dramatically deeper and a bit more consistent. However, this is a more healthier needle depth versus this one right here. So I hope that you can see the difference right there versus the epidermis and dermis. And granted, this is using a banana. What I'm trying to do is demonstrate the ideas of where the epidermis is, where the dermis is, and where the hypodermis is going to be, because we can't do this on human skin. So you can see right here, this is a bit more deeper, and this right here could even be a little bit more. Kind of get the idea there, but that is definitely a lot more healthier of a depth, and this would hold longer than a tattoo like this. Let's go ahead and go over here and let's demonstrate the hypodermis, and I'm gonna start right around here. So you kind of get the idea of what's happening here. At this point, we're just completely damaging the skin all in general. And this right here is just way too deep. You can kind of see why we're only working off just the very tips of our needles. Allow me to show you here. So this right here is exactly what we want to avoid and stay away from at all costs. This is not how we want to be tattooing. We shouldn't be going this deep. This right here is not healthy. This is not okay. You can kind of see these differences right here from the epidermis, which is the top layer of the skin, the dermis, which is where the ink is going to live, and the blowout, which is what this looks like. So you can kind of see what's happening under the skin with this banana right here when we are not hitting the right layer, when we're hitting the correct layer, and when we're doing too much. Here is a close-up view, and allow me to really show you this here. So again, this is the epidermis. This is definitely going to fade and fall out over time, and from this point we can kind of see why that's going to happen, as there's nothing that the pigment is going to hold on to. It's in the superficial layers of the skin there. And over here we have the dermis on this side over here, and right here we have blowouts. That's the epidermis. That's the dermis area. And we blew that out. You can even see from up top too as well what's happening. I want to have another view here, and I want to show you all the epidermis, the dermis, and the hypodermis real time right here. So this would be the epidermis. Just the very top superficial layer of the skin, as you can see right there. Just the very top layer of the skin. We didn't go deep at all. So over time this would definitely fade. This would not hold up the test of time. You can see it's a very first superficial layer of the skin. Let me go into the dermis here now. So you can see now we're getting a bit more deeper, and we're getting into the dermis area. From up top, it looks like a nice clean line there. So does that one. However, the thing is, during healing stages, tattoos tend to peel, and they do heal. So when that happens, this would have lost a lot of its integrity versus this right here. And you can see the visual difference from the side. This is a lot more healthier than this right here. And let me demonstrate just a complete blowout here. So you can see right there that instantly, even though it's away from the edge there, that there's a lot of bruising going on even from this side of the profile. Keep in mind the line was done a little bit too far away. I should have gotten a little closer to the edge, but I didn't there. But we could still see the bruising happening from over here, and it's going to be the exact same thing when it comes to human skin. You can see the amount of bruising and damage that's being done there. That's kind of just straightforward and self-explanatory. That's an obvious blowout, that's scarring, and that is a tremendous amount of pain for any client that would ever have to go through that. I would like for you to please keep in mind that any needle is completely capable of blowing out skin, whether it's an 11 round liner, 5 round liner, round shader, it does not matter. Every single needle is capable of blowing out skin. I'm only using a thinner needle here for demonstration purposes, but I just wanted to point that, and I want to reiterate that you can blow out human skin with any needle. If I tried to do this with a round shader, more than likely it would just eat up the entire banana and I wouldn't really get any points across, which is why I'm going with a smaller needle configuration so we can actually see the damage that's being done. Here's a clear and accurate representation of what's happening under the skin. So we have a more healthy, this right here is the epidermis. We have a healthier approach right here. This one would hold up and the integrity would stay. And this right here would just cause damage, tremendous pain, and bruising. This is going to potentially be scarred. You get the idea. So epidermis, dermis, hypodermis. Let's go ahead and switch on over to a different angle, and I'm going to demonstrate what blowing out human skin looks like, and then we can come back. I would like to do a recap, and then we can conclude the video. And again, at this point, I want to encourage, should you have any questions at all, I'm going to encourage you, drop a comment down below. Let's jump into a quick recap before we conclude this video. Now that we have some fresh measurements and some fresh visual demonstrations in our head, allow me to go ahead and do a quick recap, and then we can kind of conclude the video that way. So right here, again, we do have the epidermis, dermis, and hypodermis. The ink should be going into the dermis for it to be able to stand the test of time, for us to be able to get clean, smooth, saturated lines with healing results. We're going to want to be in the dermis. Anything below the dermis is going to be considered a blowout. For me personally, this is the way that I look at it. Anywhere beneath the dermis, this is where a lot of adversities can happen, and some that do come to mind off the top are the client is more prone to infection because the tattoo wounds are more greater. The tattoo could heal with a blurring type of effect, or worse, it can have like a bruise type of look permanently to it, where some of the lines look like it's bruised around it. And it may not necessarily be bruised per se, but more so what happened is that the ink hit that hypodermis and it went ahead and it spread underneath, as the banana was showing us earlier. For me personally, I'm always wanting to avoid the hypodermis at all costs. This is just an area that I do not want to go, and I'm able to establish that by practicing on fake skin. But yeah, for me, I would much rather be able to touch up a tattoo later on as opposed to try to fix a blowout. So keep in mind that we can always add, we can't take away, and that's my logic when I tattoo. Obviously the epidermis layer is going to be the superficial layer, where if we're not going deep enough into the dermis, then we're going to get a faded and or lost tattoo. Now that we've gone over some important aspects of needle depth, I feel like this is a good place to conclude the video. I want to encourage you, if you have any questions at all, drop them in the comment section down below and I will do my absolute best to assist you in the best possible direction. I also have social medias under the same name as this YouTube channel. I have Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. I would truly appreciate the support on there as well. If you found this video helpful and enjoyed my channel, consider becoming a Patreon or purchasing a Super Things down below in this video. I would truly appreciate that support as well. Thank you all for tuning in yet again. You have a great day.